Okay, so Robert Griffin III was one of the most athletic, dynamic, unstoppable young quarterbacks that we've ever seen in this sacred league, but he got hurt. And chances are, if you know a little bit about NFL history, you probably know that already. So the question then becomes, was that it? Was one singular freak injury enough to end the career of a potential Hall of Famer? And, well, believe it or not, the answer to that question is no. Absolutely not. There were so many people who made terrible decisions one after the other, and in combination with many other factors that we're about to go over, one man's life was changed forever. So you got all that? Cool. Alright, let's get into it. Let's dive into how everything that could have gone wrong with Robert Griffin III's career basically did, and how his superstar trajectory in the NFL was cut tragically short. The year is 2009, and we're jumping into this steamy mess of an organization at arguably their most dysfunctional point ever, and I would argue, one of the worst seasons any, and I mean any franchise, has ever had. First of all, this organization in Washington was owned by Daniel Snyder, who isn't a good dude, and before the 2009 season began, contributed to the worst free agency signing in NFL history when the Skins brought in former Titans All-Pro defensive tackle Albert Haynesworth on a 7-year, $100 million deal. This man got $41 million guaranteed and $100 million total and did nothing in just 2 seasons in Washington, but he did help the Skins stink it up in 2009, as despite somehow only playing against winless teams from weeks 1 through 6, Washington only went 2-4 during that time period and finished the year going 4-12, their worst record since 1994. And if this were just a normal bad rebuilding year, that would be one thing, but this Skins team just could not stop making headlines. Think of like the 2021 Raiders, but a little funnier. As mentioned, in weeks 1 through 6, the Skins never played against a team with a winning record, and unfortunately for them, one of those teams was the Detroit Lions, fresh off of a 0-16 season and had still yet to win a game in 19 straight battles. Once again, keep in mind this is the organization that RG3 is going to be walking into, and of course, this Detroit team handled Washington 19-14 with Matthew Stafford doing his thing, and things only got more and more hilarious as the season went on. With this 09 team being so bad on offense, the higher-ups took head coach Jim Zorn's play-calling duties and handed it to a guy in Sherman Lewis, who famously was calling bingo for some geezers days prior. And of course, how could I forget this Washington team gave us, in my opinion, the worst play in all of NFL history.
What in the wide world is that? Bruce Johnson with the interception. This is embarrassing.
It's so beautiful to watch every time. The classic swinging gate play is a perfect symbolic representation of this entire organization. And you know, I could go on and on. This team also blew a game versus the undefeated Saints in week 13 off of a missed 23-yard field goal, and another play that simply just doesn't happen. But back on track. Before the 2009 season concluded, Washington brought in general manager Bruce Allen and head coach Mike Shanahan. Now, in Allen's case, his track record was sketchy, but Shanahan was a proven winner, and this team also had a ton of lesser-known bright young guys in Mike's son Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, and later Mike McDaniel. So there were seeds planted, and Washington showed slight improvements across the board, getting better on offense at least, but over the next 2 years, from 2010 to 2011, the team still just had almost no talent and were stuck on the ocean floor with the rest of the trash the NFL had to offer. And this team had problems everywhere, but their biggest issue was the quarterback hole. But it wasn't just a hole. This was a goddamn canyon that needed filling. So in 2010, Daniel Snyder wanted to go out and get Donovan McNabb, which Shanahan was entirely against, and when that didn't work out for both of them, they rode with a combination of Rex Grossman and John Beck in 2011. And for what it's worth, during that same stretch of time, a young quarterback and track and field guy at Baylor by the name of Robert Griffin III started to take over the college world. So keep that in mind, RG3 was showing all these signs of being special if he wasn't already, and was a consensus top 2 quarterback in the next draft. But let's get back to Snyder's lair, where after their quarterback experiment with McNabb, Sexy Rexy, and John Beck failed, Mike Shanahan swiveled in his chair and said with an evil grin, "Everything is going perfectly according to plan."
The Indianapolis Colts will release quarterback Peyton Manning.
We expect to see the old Peyton Manning.
Before RG3 was even on the radar for Washington, in the 2011 offseason, the 35-year-old Peyton Manning was the biggest free agent name since Brett Favre, and he was very open to hearing multiple teams out, and one of those teams was the good old Skins. It turns out Mike Shanahan already had a strong relationship with Peyton, so all he had to do was make the pitch to the elongated Manning that playing in Washington was the right decision for his future. They already had offensive pieces like Santana Moss, a young up-and-coming defense, and a ton of cap space to sign even more free agents, and they even had a meeting in Mike Shanahan's house where Mike and Kyle went over their potential offense with Peyton and basically pitched to him why this would be a great fit, and you know, it actually seemed like from an outside perspective, Mike Shanahan's plan was going to work out, and Peyton Manning was almost leaning towards joining Washington. However, there were slight complications, and one major one that made Peyton think twice was that his brother Eli Manning played for the Giants, and the forehead didn't want to play in the same division as Eli, but that wasn't the end-all be-all. Anything was possible, and there were still reports clearly saying that Washington was the favorite. But then, on March 9th, Washington, who held the 6th pick in the 2012 draft, traded away 2 future first-round picks and much more to the Rams for the right to the 2nd overall pick in the NFL draft. This all but ended Mike Shanahan's dream of getting Peyton, as he signed with Denver weeks later, but now they had a whole nother guy to look forward to, as with Stanford's Andrew Luck a lock for the number 1 selection, the number 2 overall pick was also all but decided the second Washington made the trade, and come draft day, everyone knew who they were drafting, and sure enough, they went to the podium and drafted their new quarterback, and this is where things get really spicy. Shockingly, yeah, they took RG3, but it's very difficult to tell how Mike Shanahan actually felt about all of this. At the time, he was all smiles and praising his new young potential superstar quarterback, but on the other hand, he had a definite plan to leave the 2012 NFL draft with at least 2 quarterbacks, and after failing to bring in Russell Wilson, who they publicly wanted, Washington drafted Michigan State quarterback Kirk Cousins to back up Robert Griffin III. Now, the Shanahans and Kirk Cousins have an interesting relationship. In Kyle's case, he clearly wanted Kirk later on in life, as according to Mike Shanahan, in 2017, the 49ers offered their first-round pick for Kirk, but in the moment, people just assumed this to be an insurance pick, where Washington said they just took advantage of a round or so of value and moved on. And the Shanahans moved on as well, focusing all of their efforts to conduct the perfect scheme for RG3 to flourish in. Now, for all their pettiness that, trust me, will come up later, I will give credit where credit's due. Mike and Kyle conjured up the exact offensive scheme to make this Washington team successful on paper. They didn't stray too far away from the traditional Shanahan outside-inside zone run plays that we still see with the 49ers today, but they knew what RG3 did best at Baylor, and that was display his ungodly athleticism and arm strength, and infuse their old offense with shiny new read option plays and a plethora of play-action calls, with Washington doing everything they could to keep defenses honest, moving RG3 in space, and for a little spoiler, by year's end, the Skins ran the play-action on 43% of plays, easily at the highest rate in the entire league. But most of this was still pretty much in theory. The scheme had worked in the preseason with the little they had put on display, admittedly looking dangerous, but many were still concerned going away from Baylor's previous all-out spread offense, and instead forcing him to become a, quote, Shanahan quarterback would hold him back from unleashing his full potential. And the first test of the Shanahan Robert Griffin III era would come in Week 1, when they traveled to the Superdome to play Drew Brees and the Saints. And in this game, Washington fans got a mere glimpse of what Robert Griffin III at his full potential could possibly become.
Vertical from the 5. Griffin looking in, Tony throws, touchdown! Fires downfield, he's now 7 for 7 as Garcon breaks free.
Robert Lee Griffin III, in just his first NFL game, solidified himself as a franchise quarterback. Not only were his stats beyond impressive, helping contribute 2 passing touchdowns in a 40-32 win, but he led the NFL in passer rating in his first ever NFL game. So for the first time in forever, Washington fans were shown a glimmer of light in the dark tunnel that was the Dan Snyder era. But as quickly as the light was shown to them, things got dark rather quickly. From weeks 2 through 9, Washington only won 2 games, and in a division with the defending Super Bowl champion Giants and Tony Romo's Cowboys, the Skins had completely fallen behind in the NFC East. But this was not RG3's fault. For the most part, the offense was doing its thing outside of Shanahan getting a little ambitious and using RG3 as a wide receiver, and RG3 himself just choosing not to slide way too often, resulting in a concussion in week 5 and a subsequent fine for Washington for trying to cover it up. But that's besides the point. For now, because at this moment in history, there were way more problems on defense, as after Pro Bowler Brian Orakpo went down with a season-ending pec injury, during this losing streak, the defense gave up 27 points per game and allowed some absolutely humiliating plays to happen in the process. So there was good and there was bad so far in RG3's rookie season. This man quite literally was the definition of this classic image, but the team just kept finding new ways to lose games. So although they were bad record-wise, the players still had confidence in themselves. And to be fair, this team was probably right. Their big free agent acquisition, Pierre Garçon, was just now getting healthy, and alongside his fellow wide receiver Santana Moss and rookie running back Alfred Morris, there were real weapons. All the pieces were in place. RG3, Shanahan, and the others just had to figure out a way to solve this puzzle. Somehow, some way though, the puzzle started to get solved, and Washington took it slow, winning 1 game at a time. First, they knocked off the Eagles after their bye week, which, whatever, the Eagles won 4 games that year, so that was expected. But then they beat the Cowboys, and then the Giants, and all of a sudden, holy shit, the Skins were alive. RG3 was playing his best football, and the rest of the team proved at their peaks, besides the 49ers, they were the most terrifying team the NFC had to offer. But I did say NFC and not AFC. And going into a Week 14 matchup, they would face off against the eventual Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens in a game that, even to this day, is probably their most detrimental of the last 20 years or so. So, the Ravens came into FedEx Field, and although the Skins have been in must-win mode since Week 9, the Ravens also needed a win to clinch a playoff spot at 9-3, so they weren't playing for nothing either. And early on, the Ravens, led by Floyd Mayweather, ran the hell out of the ball in the first half, but RG3 and company hung right there with them, despite letting Rob get popped all game long. He kept the game to a minimal 21-14 game at halftime. But time went on, and after a few forced turnovers, here's the situation. Ray Rice punches in the touchdown, and Washington is now behind by 8 points. And when the Ravens kick it off back to Washington, return man Niles Paul fumbled the ball, and the Ravens took over on possession. Baltimore was set to take over the football and run clock to end the game, not giving RG3 any more chances, but unfortunately, fate had other plans, with it being revealed that Baltimore recovered the kick out of bounds, meaning the Skins got the ball back, and after this drive, RG3 would truly never be the same player again. 1 minute and 56 seconds left on the clock. 2nd down and 19. Immediately after taking a sack, rather than taking the drag route that developed in front of him, RG3 decided to take off and run with it, and he'd done this so many times in the past, but this one play, everything just went wrong, and a combination of him choosing not to slide and a very, very large man contributed in RG3 getting injured.
Griffin takes off and is able to reach the 40-yard line, throws for 13. He's slow to get up.
This is Haloti Ngata, a 330-pound man at least, so just imagine what that would feel like to have him smash into your leg. It wouldn't feel great. And obviously, RG3 was forced to be carried to the sideline by his teammates, but miraculously, just one play later, Griffin came back out onto the field, and in the moment, everyone was shocked, but they were even more baffled after the game, questioning why the hell Mike Shanahan would ever risk the health of their future star quarterback in a regular season game like this. But of course, in a story like this, with so many moving pieces, it's not that easy to blame just one guy. And Shanahan said the only reason he threw Robert back into the furnace was because, according to RG3, the team doctor, Dr. James Andrews, said he was ready to go. But James Andrews himself told the media that when RG3 got hurt, he didn't even let the medical team look at him, and he jogged up and down the sidelines for a few minutes and eventually just told Shanahan nothing was wrong and he was good to go. Alright, but as weird as this sounds, I do understand. From RG3's perspective, this is a must-win game or else they're basically eliminated from the playoffs, and his team needs a touchdown. Coming out of the game now probably meant quitting on his team in his mind, but there are costs to decisions like this, and in one of the most cruel, and I mean blatantly obvious, cruel forms of foreshadowing I've ever seen, period. On 1st and 10, RG3 tries to recover a fumbled snap and ends up getting re-injured and is literally dragged off the field, supporting his body with zero power. So yeah, you'll see another play like that down the road, but as you'll come to see, this man just had a fetish for the turf monster, and he just didn't want to let his team down even when he was injured. But luckily, the insurance Shanahan invested in earlier paid off, and Captain Kirk led the Skins to a comeback 31-28 overtime victory. But as great as this win was, all eyes turned to the health of RG3, and it wasn't looking good. Rob had a grade 1 ligament sprain, an injury that usually takes about 3.5 weeks to recover from. And of course, he wanted to be back out there immediately. Resting, I'll rest when I'm dead, telling reporters that his knee was fine and the only way he's going to be taken off a football field is when he's carted off, and even then, he'll just jump off the cart and get right back into action. Alright, but luckily Shanahan wasn't having any of that, and neither were the team doctors for at least 1 week. And with RG3 on the sideline, Kirk Cousins went out there and played great, flourishing in the Shanahan scheme, dropping this stat line. And now RG3 had 2 paths to choose from. Feeling genuinely threatened by his job, he could either allow himself to heal and get ready for a potential playoff run, or he could push himself back out there even if he wasn't ready with the help of his owner, Dan Snyder. You see, in a very unlikely relationship, Snyder and RG3 were very close back then, like way too close. It was rumored that RG3 had access to Snyder's private jet, his wife was getting limo rides to games, it was a lot, but RG3 knew that Snyder had leverage over everyone in the building, and I say that because, suspiciously, Mike Shanahan said before their Week 16 game versus Philly that they're not going to play RG3 until the doctors feel there's no chance for injury. But at the same time, the doctors said that we did clear him to play, but we didn't want to, and they've been a nervous wreck letting him come back as quickly as he has, so maybe it's just me, but something sounds a little bit off here. To me, this really smells like owner interference, but maybe not, and what did happen is RG3 was rushed back from injury quicker than anyone could have expected, and although he didn't look anywhere near 100%, he did just enough to once again handle the trash-ass Eagles, and now the table was set, and Washington could not ask for a more fun challenge in Week 17. Sunday Night Football, prime time, Cowboys vs. Skins. Final game of the season where the winner would take the division all for themselves. All the stars were coming out to play in this game. RG3, Tony Romo, DeMarco Murray, Dez Bryant, London Fletcher, Ernie Sims, and for all of those guys, in this game, one man stole the show and won the game almost entirely by himself, and that was one of the Skins' 2012 6th-round picks in running back Alfred Morris, who I mentioned briefly earlier, but this season, he eclipsed well over 1,000 yards and was eating every week in the Shanahan zone run scheme. And although he logged multiple 100-yard performances this season, he saved his best for last, telling RG3 to rest up, and he's got this game on locks, dropping the slowest 200-yard 3-touchdown performance you'll ever see, but it was enough, and luckily for Washington, Tony Romo wasn't feeling it that day, and after the final Alfred Morris touchdown, they had done it. Washington had won the NFC East, beating Dallas 28-18, reeling off 7 straight wins to end the season. RG3 made the Pro Bowl and won Offensive Rookie of the Year, and now they would host a wildcard game against a guy who we've already briefly discussed as well, who eventually blossomed into a first ballot Hall of Famer and far and away the best quarterback from his class. 2 of the NFL's best young QBs of all time to that point would go at it. Russ versus RG3, a 3rd round pick versus the 2nd overall pick, who both had very similar numbers, where only one guy would leave alive. And to confirm this was the matchup we were getting, although RG3 still wasn't healthy, he was technically cleared to play again, and come game time, there was no question as to who Washington's starting quarterback was. God damn it. I'm not surprised that RG3 was playing injured again, but whatever. It's time to enter the gates of hell for Washington fans. So, after throwing a touchdown, the football gods cried out to RG3 for the first time, begging him to check himself out of the game, when with 3 minutes and 26 seconds left in the first quarter, Rob runs a routine bootleg to his right, but after the play, he was very slow to get back up. But if you think that was going to be enough to take RG3 out of the game, then you're unfortunately mistaken. And he finished the drive, threw another touchdown, took a dirty shot from Bruce Irvin, and eventually the trainers were able to wrangle RG3 into the medical tent, where it was reported that the only thing that happened in that tent was RG3 telling the trainers that he's not coming out of the game no matter what. And after getting his knee retaped and a brace back onto the previously injured area, he got off the table and said, "I'm fine, I'm ready to go." Okay then, well, that was strike 1 for sure, with 2 to come. But Mike Shanahan knew RG3 was injured. The doctors knew he was injured, and yet, not only did Robert continue to play, but as the flow of the game went on and Seattle crawled back to bring it to within 1 point, Shanahan treated him as if he was the same exact quarterback, inexplicably watching as RG3 ran a read option to the left side, limping towards the out-of-bounds line every step of the way. I mean, this whole situation was just begging for something terrible to happen. When you have a quarterback who doesn't want to come out of the game no matter how hurt he is, a coach who didn't pull him from the game for reasons, and a corrupt possible medical staff, what you get is just way too much bad voodoo, and here we are at the climax. You're about to see a play that I'm sure you've seen tens if not hundreds of times, where Robert Griffin III's career was changed forever.
And Robert Griffin III is down on the ground and can't get up.
Torn ACL, torn LCL, and torn meniscus. One of the most brutal injuries in sports history left RG3's future career in serious doubt, especially since he had just torn his ACL in college as well. This was just the worst case scenario for the entire organization of Washington, and the media just took that narrative and went hog wild with it. Instantly, everyone wanted to play the blame game, and to a certain extent, people still do today, with the media and a majority of people on YouTube videos made about RG3, and also probably on this exact video you're watching right now, people were saying this was all Mike Shanahan's fault for leaving RG3 in the game, but the answer on who's to blame for this isn't an easy one, not even close. We know RG3 wanted to play himself, and he was not going to let Shanahan take him out of the game, but the question still remains, isn't Mike Shanahan the coach? Why doesn't he just overrule Robert? I mean, he's a player after all, so he should have the final say in everything, right? Right? So, to step into the future for a second, a year after this game took place, an anonymous source leaked to the media that Mike Shanahan was sick and tired of the relationship that RG3 and owner Dan Snyder had. He felt like Robert was becoming a puppet of Snyder's, and we'll touch more on this story in a minute or two, but just know things seemingly got so ugly beyond repair to the point where Shanahan cleaned out his desk before the Seahawks game in preparation of resigning or being fired. Now, like I said, there's about 8 layers to this onion, and the anonymous source very likely could have been from Shanahan's camp themselves, so take this information with a more than healthy dosage of sodium chloride. But the sad truth is, unless everyone comes forward, we'll never truly know why RG3 was able to play in the Seahawks game and what led to his injury. But we can come up with theories. And my personal theory is that RG3 and Snyder are to blame here. I believe that Snyder was able to use his influence and basically make Shanahan and the team doctors play RG3 no matter what. But hey, that's just a theory. Anyway, whoever you choose to blame is up to you, but back in reality, after the game, RG3 seemingly 50% confirmed my theory. He didn't entirely say that Shanahan wanted him out of the game, but he did say, yeah, I respect my authority and my coach and whatever, but there was no way I was coming out of that game no matter what. And he said this after his injury, so this tells me if he had a chance to do it over, he'd do it again. I just don't understand. His leg was damn near amputated, and RG3 basically said he had no regrets about what happened. Whatever, Mike Shanahan was still not completely innocent though, and it seemed RG3 and possibly Snyder, through RG3, wanted to get back at him, with Rob scheduling a meeting with 3 of the most gifted football minds in the last 20 years, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, and Matt LaFleur in one room, and told them all to shut the fuck up while I tell you what I'm not doing, and proceeded to list 19 plays Washington ran last year that he would not be doing any longer, with a majority of those plays allegedly being centered around read options and quarterback runs. Now, Shanahan believed Snyder was still possessing Robert, but even if it was true, the message that he was presenting was still clear. RG3 wanted to become a pocket passer, and with Snyder's power looming over all of them, they listened. But remember, Mike Shanahan is petty, and the triangular duel between him, RG3, and Dan Snyder had also only just begun. So the war began. First, Shanahan was already pissed off at the front office, still led by Snyder and Bruce Allen, because of a $36 million cap penalty they had received from back in 2010, which basically meant they were stuck with the same team, only being able to sign E.J. Biggers and Nick Barnett to sub-$2 million contracts. So, possibly, in order to get back at Snyder and RG3, Shanahan decided that Robert wasn't going to play in any preseason games, and didn't outright say it, but from everything shown in practice and training camp, Kirk Cousins was looking to be the starter come week 1. So, because RG3 clearly does not take shots to his job security kindly, the f***er dropped a documentary called RG3, The Will to Win. And in the documentary, he basically called out the entire Washington staff when he changed his passcode to the first numbers of the start of training camp, the start of preseason, and the first regular season game. Okay, so eventually, once everyone was talking about his remarkable recovery, RG3, possibly on purpose, basically manipulated the entire media into winning over the starting job going into a week 1 game versus Chip Kelly and the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, that was a lot, but here we are, new season, new year, a new RG3, and maybe Shanahan was using RG3 wrong all along, and we can finally see what he can do as a traditional pocket passer. And those first 2 games, they were rough. And quickly, very, very quickly, we learned that Mike Shanahan maybe was right about the offensive scheme, and RG3 is nowhere near ready to become a full-out pocket passer.
Goes down the middle, and Robert Griffin III is picked off.
That's triple coverage.
Yeah, the man is not Tom Brady. Not only was RG3 still not sliding at a high enough rate, but with his demands being satisfied, Washington just wasn't using a possibly still unhealthy Rob to his fullest potential, as taking away 2 garbage time carries for 12 yards in the Eagles game, from weeks 1 through 2, Robert was only averaging 3.5 carries for 7.5 yards per game, and comparing that to his near 9 carries for 60 yards before his Ravens injury last year, it becomes pretty clear that in order to be effective, he's going to need to get himself out in space more, which led to RG3 saying, alright, fine, maybe I was wrong, I'm not a pocket passer, and since I'm totally 100% healthy, I'll start running the ball more, and everything will go back to normal. So, yeah, he started running more, and things actually did get better. Week by week, RG3 was playing himself back into football shape, and specifically from weeks 7 through 9, the Skins went 2-1, only losing a game to the 2013 Broncos and God mode Peyton Manning, who could have been in Washington, and They allowed 31 points in the fourth quarter and had Robert go to the locker room again, but whatever, the focus was on the resurrection of RG3, who just had his best game of the season versus Chicago, passing and running like his old self, and now, sitting at 3-5, they were in damn near the same situation as last year. All they had to do was win this game versus Minnesota, and then the rest of the remaining games on their schedule, and they would be in the playoffs, so, you know, that's not asking for too much at all, of course. So, here's the thing. The first half of this game versus the Vikings was awesome. I remember watching this game live, and looking back at it, RG3 was amazing in the first half, carrying the team more than he ever had before this season, but he did slow down in the second half. After getting sacked 4 times in the game, Washington found themselves down by 7 and asked Robert to go win this game by himself. So RG3 grabbed the ball and started doing his thing, and eventually the Skins found themselves inside the 10-yard line with a chance to keep their season alive, and unfortunately they just fell apart. Despite the Vikings calling a timeout because reasons, RG3 and the offense could not get it done. 4 straight plays resulted in 0 points, and the Skins lost the game 34-27. And that was it. The season basically ended on that very day. They didn't know it at the time, but it was over. The entire rest of the 2013 season for Washington was a living nightmare, filled with more pettiness, blaming, and despair. In Week 11, after the Vikings game, Chip Kelly's Eagles beat down the Skins once again, but this time, RG3 hit a boiling point. As the season went on, his health had continued to be questioned, and things were so bad that opposing players were begging RG3 to just rest. 49ers Pro Bowl linebacker Ahmad Brooks literally straight up said, dude, just go to the bench. You're not healthy, and everyone can see it, but RG3 still would remain out there, and after the Eagles game, frustration grabbed a hold of him as well, putting the blame on not himself or his health, but his receivers are to blame, because they simply can't get open. They suck. Mind you, the Skins basically lost this game after RG3 threw this prayer up on 3rd and 1. And would you believe me if I said it still got worse from here? The pettiness between Shanahan, Snyder, and Rob continued to just get toxic, with reports coming out of all camps, all angles, digging into one another, with each being unconfirmed, then denied almost instantly, until finally, the looming shadow of Kirk Cousins grew too large, and RG3's straight-up bad play from weeks 12 through 14 just spoke for itself. And on December 11th, 2013, Robert Griffin III, the unanimous franchise quarterback for Washington just a calendar year earlier, was benched and would never return to action in 2013. RG3 was on the bench, but even Kirk Cousins wasn't able to do anything with this disaster of a team, and the Skins finished the 2013 season with a complete opposite end to their 2012 campaign, losing 8 straight games to end with a 3-13 record, including a loss so bad to Kansas City that this picture can exist. There's nobody there in the 3rd quarter, and one day after their final game, Dan Snyder snuck into Mike's office and took care of him, and now Washington needed a new head coach with Mike Shanahan's firing, and offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan also left, so they needed 2 new guys to remold RG3 into a brand new changed man. So in came Jay Gruden to be the head coach, and a promoted tight end coach named Sean McVay would be the offensive coordinator. And all summer long, they worked on a 100% healthy RG3, tinkering with his skill set while still having to work around him wanting to become a pocket passer. But everything coming out of camp was overwhelmingly positive, and there was so much hype surrounding the idea of a brand new version of RG3. So come week 1, it was a very similar atmosphere to their week 1 game versus the Eagles last year. RG3 was back, and they were set to face off against a new head coach, this time in Bill O'Brien. And as the game started, it just didn't go well whatsoever. RG3 was under pressure for most of the game, but he also just looked confused in the pocket, and to many people, this game was the death of RG3's superstar potential. His athleticism had taken a massive hit from the injuries, but even scarier, he simply couldn't read coverages very well, and he was also injury prone as after his lackluster performance, RG3 got hurt against Jacksonville, and in his place, Kirk Cousins stepped right into his role and, unfortunately for Robert, looked better at absolutely everything, leading the Skins to a 41-10 demolition of the Jaguars, dropping a very good stat line in the process. So you know the drill, Kirk plays well, RG3 gets pissed, and does everything he can to get his job back. And after Kirk started playing poorly eventually and then got hurt, Colt McCoy would take his job, and now here we are again. Washington is 3-5 and has a game against the Minnesota Vikings with RG3 named the starter, debatably because of Dan Snyder pulling some strings, and they had a shot to turn their season around. Would we be seeing more of the 2012 RG3 or 2013? And well, actually, Rob looked really solid in this game, but the Skins did lose 26-29 in the final minutes, but who cares? Oh my god! RG3 can still play football. There's still some talent left in the tank, and if only someone can teach the man to slide every once in a goddamn while, he could still be at the very least an above average starter, or a reality could set in, because with all of his superstar potential already drained out of him, the 2014 season proved that RG3 would never really be Washington's starting quarterback ever again.
He does a lot. Here's a tip ball and an interception. And running it in, Jonathan Banks. Does he get in? He does. Touchdown.
This was it. The Robert Griffin III era was over. Things devolved to the point where Rob was playing so poorly that it wasn't even entirely possible to assess what the other problems were on the team. RG3 was just hoarding all the shit, and other teams knew it too. Hell, when the Skins played the Rams later that season with Colt McCoy set to start, the Rams had a bit of Sunday afternoon fun, sending out all 6 players the Rams received from the RG3 trade just 2 years prior, and nobody's going to show respect to a semi-mobile pocket passer who throws an interception on a play like this. So that was it. In 2015, RG3 officially lost his job to Kirk Cousins and couldn't fight back anymore. But to his credit, although he never even became a solid backup, he managed to hang around the league all the way until 2020, starting games for the Browns and Ravens here and there, mentoring Lamar Jackson as well in Baltimore. But maybe there's something more to take away from that relationship and the way Robert's career came to an end, because Lamar Jackson effectively became what RG3 could not. He never leaned fully into a pocket passer role and never will, but Lamar has truly learned how to read defenses and evolved his game over time. But with RG3, that just never happened. The grim reality is Robert just was never able to become a better quarterback. Yes, he may have worked harder than literally everyone on his teams, but as Mike Shanahan himself said, there's more to football than just working out. Lifting more weights than everyone is cool and all, but you also need to improve intellectually at quarterback especially and take care of yourself. And for Robert, those were the key factors in his downfall. Other guys during this era suffered from the same issues too though. Colin Kaepernick never truly learned how to read defenses either, which also led to his benching. But on the other side of the coin, people like Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen proved that they can be more than just a read option one trick, while others like Anthony Richardson try to join that club and avoid a similar fate to RG3. But although the career of Robert Griffin III is now in the past, for a small moment there, it looked like the NFL was going to be in his control for years to come. Anyway, if you like this video, then watch this video right here that I just did on the Buffalo Bills and how they managed to lose 4 Super Bowls in a row. It's pretty good, trust me. And thanks to all my Patreons for pledging $1. It really means a lot. And if you like this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. So, anyways, until next time.